Imagine this. You walk into a room full of people. They're laughing, talking, bonding, but there is always one person standing alone in the corner, quiet, distant, watching everything. Not because they are shy, but because their mind works differently. They see the world through a lens most people never notice. A lens of strategy, of distrust, of calculation. And sometimes, that lens becomes the very reason they walk through life with no real friends at all. Today, we're going to explore a question most people assume they already understand. Why do some people have no friends? But not in the usual way. Not with cliches. Not with the simple answers society loves to give. We're going deeper into the psychology of the friendless, through the eyes of Machiavelli and the modern science of personality. Because the truth is unsettling. Many people who end up with no friends aren't weak, broken, or socially unaware. Some are the opposite. Some are highly intelligent, highly strategic, and deeply self-protective. And some carry a Machiavellian edge. An instinct to observe rather than reveal, to calculate rather than trust, to think 5 steps ahead, while the rest of the world is busy making small talk. This mindset can be powerful, but it can also isolate. Before we go further, let's understand something important. Machiavellianism isn't just manipulation, as most people assume. It's a personality trait, built on 3 pillars: distrust, strategic thinking, and emotional distance. A Machiavellian person sees people the way a chess player sees the board. Every interaction has a motive. Every relationship has a cost. They look for patterns, weaknesses, and opportunities. They rarely take words at face value, and while this makes them sharper than most, it also makes friendships difficult, because friendship requires vulnerability, and vulnerability feels like a trap. Studies in personality psychology reveal something fascinating. People high in Machiavellian traits often avoid deep friendships, not because they don't want connection, but because they don't believe connection is safe. Their mind is always scanning for betrayal, hidden intentions, and power dynamics. This constant analysis keeps them in control, but also keeps them alone. And this is where the mystery begins. Because friendlessness isn't always a sign of failure. It can be a sign of deeper psychological systems at work. People with Machiavellian tendencies may choose solitude or weakness. They would rather have no friends than the wrong friends. They would rather walk alone than walk with those who might slow them down. But behind that armor, behind the strategy, there is often a human story: past betrayals, emotional wounds, or early experiences that shaped their worldview. In this video, you're going to learn the real reasons some people walk through life without friends, and how Machiavellian psychology explains behaviors that many misunderstand. We'll explore why these individuals think the way they do, how their minds protect them, and the hidden inner conflicts that create emotional distance. You'll discover psychological patterns most people never talk about, and you'll see how these traits can lead to isolation, even when someone appears confident, strong, or successful. And by the end, you'll understand not just the what, but the why. So stay with me until the end, because the deeper insights, the ones that reveal what truly shapes a friendless life, will only make sense once the full picture is revealed. And if you've ever felt alone yourself, or wondered why certain people keep others at a distance, this video might answer questions you didn't even know you had. Welcome to Psych Algorithm. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe, because here we decode the minds most people can't understand. Before we talk about the reasons people end up alone, we need to understand something that sits at the core of Machiavellian psychology. Distrust. Not the casual kind. Not the "I don't like this person" kind. I'm talking about a deep-rooted belief that human beings by nature act for themselves first. A belief that every smile hides a strategy, every promise hides a condition, and every relationship carries a risk. For someone with Machiavellian traits, trust isn't just hard, it feels dangerous. This distrust doesn't appear out of nowhere. It forms slowly, layer by layer, through years of watching how people behave. Studies in personality psychology describe it clearly. Individuals high in Machiavellianism are constantly interpreting motives, scanning intentions, and assuming self-interest. Even when someone acts kind, generous, or supportive, the Machiavellian mind quietly asks, why? What do they gain? What's the angle? And once that question appears, it never goes away. This mindset shapes how they see the world. For most people, relationships begin with openness, giving others the benefit of the doubt. But a Machiavellian person does the opposite. They start from a place of skepticism. They assume people wear masks. They assume loyalty is temporary. And they assume that every connection could shift the moment interests no longer align. So instead of leaning forward, they pull back. Instead of opening up, they observe. Instead of trusting someone's words, they analyze their actions, their tone, their inconsistencies, their long-term behavior. It's not paranoia, it's survival logic to them. When you live with this mindset, even the simplest social interactions carry weight. A friend's mistake becomes a warning sign. A broken promise becomes proof. A moment of conflict becomes a reminder that closeness is airy. So the Machiavellian person keeps their inner world locked. They reveal little. They share only what is necessary. They never let someone have emotional power over them, because emotional power means potential weakness, and weakness can be used against them. This psychological wall has consequences, even if they don't show it. People feel the distance. They sense the guardedness. They notice how the Machiavellian individual rarely confides, rarely relies on others, rarely expresses vulnerability, and slowly, any chance for deep connection fades. It's not that they push people away intentionally. It's that intimacy requires trust, and trust feels like the one thing they cannot afford to give. Even in close relationships, family, partners, lifelong acquaintances, the same pattern appears. They look for hidden motives. They interpret gestures through a filter of suspicion. If someone helps them, they wonder when the revain will be demanded. If someone loves them, they wonder whether that love will one day be withdrawn. If someone promises loyalty, they quietly wait for the moment it breaks. This constant internal monitoring keeps them emotionally safe, but it also keeps them emotionally alone. And here lies the quiet irony. The Machiavellian person believes distrust protects them from pain, betrayal, and disappointment. But in reality, it often protects them from the very closeness they secretly crave. Before we go deeper into the psychology of friendlessness, we need to understand how a Machiavellian mind protects itself. For most people, building friendships begins with openness, shared experiences, and emotional exchange. But for someone shaped by Machiavellian traits, connection requires something they're rarely willing to give: vulnerability. And to them, vulnerability is the doorway through which betrayal enters. So before trust even has a chance to grow, self-protection takes control. It becomes the shield they never put down, the silent rule that governs their relationships, and the invisible barrier that keeps others at a distance. This fear of betrayal isn't always loud or dramatic. It's quiet. It's internal. It's woven into their thinking like a background alarm that never stops ringing. Every interaction is filtered through it. They ask themselves, if I share this, can it be used against me? If I get close, can they one day turn on me? Instead of letting connections form naturally, they stay in a state of emotional caution. They present a version of themselves that is precise, controlled, and guarded, making sure no one ever sees the parts that matter most. This protective instinct ensures they never feel exposed. But it also ensures that real friendships never fully develop. When connection feels risky, relationships become shallow, not because the Machiavellian person doesn't want depth, but because depth requires trust, and trust feels unsafe. So the friendships they do form often stay the surface, friendly, cooperative, even enjoyable, but never intimate. These relationships function more like alliances than bonds. They are based on shared goals, mutual benefit, or convenience. A Machiavellian person might offer help, support, or companionship, but always within limits. They rarely let someone cross the line into their emotional world. As a result, their connections feel transactional, even if that wasn't their intention. People come and go, and the Machiavellian individual accepts it without surprise. To them, closeness was never part of the equation to begin with. This pattern becomes even stronger, because Machiavellian people tend to focus on the negative side of relationships. Where most people see potential for joy or support, they see risk. Where others see loyalty, they fragility. Their mind naturally jumps to what could go wrong. They anticipate betrayal long before any sign of it appears. They anticipate rejection even when things seem stable. This pessimistic lens shapes their decisions. It tells them that opening up is a gamble they're likely to lose. So instead of reaching toward people, they pull away. Instead of trusting a good moment, they question it. Instead of building, they guard. This negative expectation doesn't just affect how they view others. It affects how they view themselves in relationships. They may believe that depending on someone is foolish, that emotional intimacy weakens their position, or that letting others too close invites chaos into their life. With these beliefs, choosing distance becomes a logical choice. Why risk losing something when you can avoid the game entirely? Why risk being hurt when solitude offers safety? This mindset makes emotional isolation feel like a rational strategy rather than a lonely consequence. Another factor that deepens their isolation is selectiveness, an intensity of standards that few people can meet. While many individuals value specific qualities in friends, a Machiavellian person raises the bar to levels so high that only a tiny number of people could ever qualify. They want loyalty without conditions, understanding without vulnerability, benefit without risk. They look for people who are stable, consistent, and strategically useful. And because they distrust easily, any small flaw becomes a reason to distance themselves. Someone who is unpredictable, not safe. Someone too emotional, too risky. Someone too curious, a threat. Someone who wants closeness, too demanding. In their mind, choosing no friends becomes safer than choosing the wrong friends. They would rather walk alone with certainty than walk with others whose motives they question. They would rather keep their circle empty than fill it with people who might one day disappoint or betray them. This isn't arrogance. It's a defensive philosophy shaped by their experiences and worldview, and it reinforces their isolation with every decision they make. Low empathy also plays a role. Machiavellian individuals often struggle to fully tune in to the emotions of others. They may understand feelings on an intellectual level, recognizing sadness, fear, or excitement, but they don't always feel these emotions alongside others. This makes emotional connection difficult. They may appear detached, uninterested, or unmoved. They might respond logically to situations that require warmth. They may misunderstand emotional needs or overlook subtle signals that most people naturally respond to. Because of this, others may find them cold or distant, even if they don't intend to be. This lack of emotional resonance creates a gap. People crave understanding, validation, and empathy from their friends. When someone consistently appears detached, the relationship loses balance. The Machiavellian person may not open up emotionally, but they also may not react to others' emotions in a way that makes them feel understood. Over time, people may stop trying. They may feel that the relationship lacks depth, comfort, or reciprocity. The Machiavellian person ends up isolated, not because they reject others, but because others don't feel connected to them. This emotional distance becomes even more complicated when combined with their preference for solitude. Some people simply feel comfortable alone. They don't need constant interaction, and they find peace in quiet. For someone with Machiavellian traits, this preference can become even stronger. Social situations feel unpredictable. Conversations require monitoring. Vulnerability lurks around every corner. So solitude becomes more than a preference. It becomes the ideal environment, a place where they remain fully in control, fully safe, and free from the emotional demands that relationships often bring. The sociality, the natural lack of motivation to engage socially, can blend with Machiavellian traits in powerful ways. It creates a person who feels no internal push to connect and sees little external reward doing so. They don't chase friendships. They don't fear missing out. They don't feel pressure to fit into social circles. Instead, they build a life that is self-contained, strategic, and efficient. It may be structured, productive, and calm, but it is also deeply isolated. This combination of self-protection, skepticism, high standards, low empathy, and comfort with solitude shapes a life where friendships rarely grow. Not because the person is incapable of forming them, but because the internal barriers they build are stronger than any potential connection. Every step toward closeness triggers an instinct to retreat. Every moment of vulnerability triggers a reflex to protect. Every potential friend is evaluated not for emotional compatibility, but for risk. And so, without ever saying the words or making the decision consciously, the Machiavellian person ends up alone, not by accident, but by design. Their mind has created a world where connection feels optional, relationships feel dangerous, and solitude feels like the only place where control remains intact. Before we talk about why some people stay alone in the present, we have to go backward to the moments that shaped them. Because for many Machiavellian individuals, friendlessness doesn't begin with personality traits or strategic thinking. It begins with pain. It begins with the first betrayal, the first disappointment, the first time they trusted someone and paid the price. Past trauma, whether obvious or subtle, becomes the seed from which their worldview grows. And once that seed is planted, it expands into a system of self-protection that follows them for life. It could be a childhood friend who broke their trust, a family member who betrayed them, a partner who lied, a circle of people who excluded them when they needed support. For most, these wounds heal slowly. But for someone with Machiavellian tendencies, they do something different. They transform the pain into strategy. They decide that vulnerability is dangerous. They decide that trusting others is a weakness. And they decide that if they want to avoid being hurt again, they must always be one step ahead. Always guarded, always prepared for disappointment. This survival logic becomes so ingrained that it shapes every relationship. Instead of approaching people with curiosity, they approach with caution. Instead of letting connections grow, they slow them down. Instead of opening up, they analyze. Trauma taught them that closeness is unpredictable and that people can shift suddenly. So they develop methods to stay safe. They hide their emotions. They limit their attachments. They keep their real thoughts locked away. These strategies were meant to protect them once, but over time they create a barrier between them and everyone else. And this barrier leads to emotional isolation. Not the kind where someone is alone in a room, but the quieter, heavier kind, where they're surrounded by others yet feel untouched and unseen. They might laugh, talk, and participate socially, but they never share their internal world. They don't confide their insecurities, their hopes, or their fears. They never give anyone access to the fragile parts of themselves. Even people who think they are close to them only understand the surface. That emotional distance becomes so normal that they don't even realize how isolated they truly are. This type of isolation is dangerous because it silently removes the foundation for real friendship. Friendship relies on mutual vulnerability, shared secrets, emotional reciprocity. Without these things, relationships stay functional, polite, even pleasant, but never intimate. The Machiavellian person may not notice the gap, but others feel it. They sense the wall. They sense the lack of depth. And over time, they may drift away, leaving the Machiavellian individual to wonder why nothing ever becomes meaningful. On top of this emotional distance, there is another factor: social fatigue. Many people naturally lose energy in social settings, but for someone who is constantly analyzing, calculating, and protecting themselves, the social cost is in higher. Every interaction requires mental effort. Every conversation involves reading between lines, interpreting intentions, watching body language, and anticipating possible threats. It's not that they dislike people, it's that the constant vigilance exhausts them. So they begin making decisions based on efficiency. They weigh the emotional cost against the potential benefit. They might think, if I invest in this person, what do I gain? What do I risk? Will this connection drain me or help me? And because genuine emotional benefit is rare for them, they often decide that the cost is too high. They withdraw. They limit their interactions. They choose routine over relationship and solitude over social commitment. This reinforces their isolation even further, because the less they invest, the less they receive, and the less reward they see in trying. Life structure also plays a role. Not everyone who has no friends is emotionally damaged or socially avoidant. Sometimes the world itself creates barriers. Long work hours, constant relocation, family responsibilities, career demands, physical pittance from supportive communities. A Machiavellian person often prioritizes ambition, goals, or personal growth over social life. They focus on what they can control: achievements, skills, financial stability, because these things feel predictable. Unlike people, relationships, with their uncertainty and emotional complexity, become secondary to objectives that offer clearer rewards. So they throw themselves into their work, their routines, their pursuits. They optimize every hour. They choose productivity over socializing, and before they realize it, life becomes structured in a way that leaves no room for closeness. Days pass, weeks pass, and loneliness becomes a quiet companion that grows stronger with time. But this doesn't come without consequences. Being friendless has psychological effects, even when the person believes they prefer it. Emotional loneliness is one of the most powerful stressors the mind can experience. It heightens anxiety. It reduces life satisfaction. It can contribute to depression, sleep problems, physical health decline, and lower resilience during stressful times. Even the strongest, most rational individuals are not immune to the psychological weight of isolation. The human brain evolved for connection. When that connection is missing, something inside starts to erode, even if they try to ignore it. When you combine natural loneliness with a Machiavellian mindset, the outcome becomes even more complicated. They might feel dissatisfied without understanding why. They might crave connection but fear it at the same time. They might desire closeness, yet push people away. They stand at the edge of relationships, wanting to step forward but unable to take the risk. This inner conflict creates a life where they are simultaneously protected and imprisoned by their own defenses. Despite all of this, there are possible paths forward. A Machiavellian person can learn to trust slowly, cautiously, and selectively. But it requires awareness. It requires recognizing the old wounds that shaped their worldview, and understanding how those wounds still influence their choices. Self-awareness becomes the first step, because once they can identify why they distrust, they can begin to challenge it. Therapy can help them unpack the beliefs they developed from past betrayals. It provides a space where vulnerability is controlled and safe, a place where someone can express their thoughts without fear of manipulation or judgment. Over time, therapy can help them test new forms of connection, rebuild confidence in emotional closeness, and slowly reduce the power of their defensive strategies. Another essential element is vulnerability, not the dramatic kind, but small moments of openness, sharing a worry, admitting a weakness, letting someone see a glimpse beneath the mask. These small steps teach the mind that vulnerability doesn't always lead to pain. They show that connection can exist without sacrifice. And finally, choosing the right people is crucial. Machiavellian individuals don't need crowds. They don't need large social circles. They need people who respect boundaries, communicate honestly, and do not demand emotional intimacy instantly. They need relationships that grow slowly, naturally, and without pressure. When they find such people, those who don't push too hard, don't manipulate, and don't betray trust easily, they may discover that connection is not as dangerous as they once believed. Even someone who has lived behind walls for years can form bonds that are genuine and stable. The key is not to tear down the walls at once, but to build windows, small openings where the light of connection can enter, and eventually change the shape of their world. In conclusion, when we step back and look at the deeper psychology behind Machiavellian tendencies, we begin to see why some individuals struggle to form and maintain friendships. Machiavellian traits, rooted in distrust, strategic self-protection, emotional distance, and a belief in controlling outcomes, create an internal world where connection feels risky, vulnerability feels dangerous, and relying on others feels almost impossible. Someone who views relationships through the lens of advantage and calculation isn't cold by nature. They're often shaped by years of conditioning, past wounds, or learned survival tactics. These patterns make it incredibly difficult to open up, to relax, or to trust that another person can enter their world without exploiting it. That doesn't make them unworthy of friendship, nor does it make them unreachable. It simply means their path to connection is different, more layered, more guarded, and often more misunderstood. Yet it's equally important to emphasize that not everyone who has few friends, or no friends at all, is Machiavellian. Loneliness has countless roots: life circumstances, work demands, social anxiety, mental health struggles, moving frequently, or even just being in an environment that doesn't match your personality. Many people want connection, but feel constrained by their realities. Others are introverted, exhausted, or simply haven't found the right people yet. To label all social disconnection as Machiavellian would be inaccurate and What Machiavellianism does, however, is offer one framework, one psychological explanation, for the subset of individuals whose social struggles come not from lack of desire, but from deep-rooted beliefs about trust, power, and vulnerability. The more we understand these psychological dynamics, the more compassionate we can become. When we recognize that self-protection can sometimes look like manipulation, or that emotional distance can hide emotional wounds, we begin to see people not as friendless by choice, but as complex humans shaped by experiences we may not see. And that compassion matters. It helps us navigate relationships with more patience. It helps us look at ourselves with more honesty. And it helps us realize that everyone, whether Machiavellian, anxious, guarded, or simply overwhelmed, is doing the best they can with the emotional tools they have. Understanding these inner workings doesn't just make us better observers of human nature. It makes us better participants in it. It gives us a way to approach others with empathy rather than judgment, and to approach ourselves with clarity rather than shame. So as we close this video, I invite you to reflect on what you've learned about human behavior, about emotional barriers, and perhaps even about yourself. If this breakdown gave you clarity, perspective, or empowerment, then make sure to support the channel so we can continue creating content that dives beneath the surface of psychology, strategy, and the human mind. Please take a moment to like this video, drop a comment sharing your thoughts, and subscribe to our channel for more powerful insights every week. Your engagement helps us grow, helps the message reach more people, and keeps this journey going. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.